So as always, appreciate you taking time out of your very, very busy days. And we genuinely hope you get some incredible nuggets of value out of this that you can then go and consider implementing into your business. In terms of what we will cover today, try to shine a light on the challenges and why they're getting faced today. Okay. Like what is it that's been put in place in the past that's causing friction in the billing, the back-end admin teams within every single MSP across the entire planet, and why it's getting focused on now. When we gave out this agenda or something very close to this, a lot of feedbacks come back and say, hey, we'll be really interested to understand what best practice should we also be thinking about. We'll go into some real depth into naming conventions, and we will provide a handful of blogs that you can read in your own time if they're of additional interest. But there's definitely, like when we go through new implementations and we look at a naming convention set up across a few different pillars, we know if it's clean or not before we even get started, before we even get implemented. And then we'll go through some problem areas and we'll show some specific solutions through software as well. And NCE being new commerce experience, I'm sure everybody's had a good time managing that transition with Microsoft. We'll just shed again a little bit more light on what we're doing to help in that area with a pretty cool freemium tool that the waitlist is now open for. So let's kick on. So by way of introduction, I'm one of the co-founders of a company called CloudOlive. And I've been in the MSP space for 14 odd years. I was actually in an MSP down south in the UK, out of uni, and then joined Autotask once upon a time when they were just beginning to go international. So this was very early 2010s. And what I witnessed in my time at Autotask were a couple of fold that has really driven the understanding and the execution into building CloudOlive, and really the energy and excitement of why we're doing it is one, when we saw Autotask customers, and this is the exact same for ConnectWise and exact same for any bit of software, but within Autotask in particular, if the billing module was set up well, people love that system. If it wasn't set up well, people hated that system. Same goes for ConnectWise, same goes across the board, okay? The other side is, and probably most importantly, when subscription software was becoming the norm, sort of 2012, and in Microsoft Azure, 365, all of those things were just becoming, and they were putting huge amounts of investment in from the really big guys down. It was inevitable that subscription software was going to be the way that everyone consumes software. And we just got asked hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times. It was like, so how does everybody else manage all the license fluctuations across all the vendors they resell? Surely there must be a solution out there. And there never was. So 3 years ago now, my co-founder and I set out to solve that area. Can we design a way to bring any vendor, any supplier that you resell on a recurring basis and make sure you're not underbilling? Okay, that very broad problem area as we sort of stepped out, not knowing what any solution would possibly be. And then 3.5 years on with a ton of learnings, we want to try and distill down some of the learnings that we've had that were totally unobvious to us until we were 2 years into CloudOlive and probably 14 years into looking at PSA and MSPs at different angles. Okay, so we're really passionate about this area. And it's probably because we see there's light at the end of the tunnel in what is the most fragmented part of an MSP that's remaining. Okay, so if you can centralize vendor data and we naturally can read all the information from either Autotask or ConnectWise, if you bring those two things together, we want to help elevate the hard to find information and the key information. So why do we exist? We're really there to solve one universal problem faced by absolutely every MSP on the planet. You've got 5 to 20 different vendors, and data comes across in completely different formats and times, and you're left in the middle to try and understand whether or not what you're getting billed for is going out the door. At the very very crux of this problem, okay? And it's a challenge. And like the way that we think about this now is that there has been a huge amount of focus for sort of 15 years or even longer actually in service delivery, sort of when Kaseya pioneered RMM back in sort of mid 2000s, I guess it would be 2008, something like that. And up until now, finance teams really have just been left to their own devices, and there's been this rise of vendor sprawl, of which they're just left in the sort of the background to go, cool, like they just fix it magically, it just gets done, and like it's not that big of a problem. Now there's a really acute focus on there. There's an investment going in there across the board, and companies like us that are looking at it and going, like, there's a problem there that needs to be solved. And I think it's a natural evolution that the MSP for the longest time now understands burden rates of text, and they've automated, and they've got like amazing templates going in and customer CSAT scores coming and going and all the rest of it. Like, it's a natural progression to look at other areas of the MSP and go, well, where can we improve our profit margins? Because at the end of the day, profit is profit. And wherever you can improve and save time and make things simple and scalable, at the end of the day, when it comes time to have a transaction of some description with your business, then it's just going to increase the value for everyone that's involved. Okay. So let's take a very quick look at why this is so hard. Why is it that MSPs struggle? Well, why is it that CloudOlive even exists? Okay. The main reason why this challenge exists really lives in that on the left-hand side, and it's a lack of alignment. Okay. So what typically happens is a MSP will set up their system of record, Autotask, ConnectWise, Halo, Synchro, blah, 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 the list goes on, or straight into an accounting package. They set it up and they're ready to go. And then a month or two later, vendor reports and invoices start coming through, and all of a sudden they're not the same. They're a little bit out of alignment. Like when things are set up and it says the blue service goes to the blue service and it's 10 units and it's like 10 units and it flows. Very vanilla, very, very simple. But the bulk of the time, there's some form of misalignment with buying and selling. And this can go to many different ways. Like this can be that the vendor's saying 10 units and you're saying 1 unit, or vice versa, or you're breaking things apart to go to different either tenants, contracts, agreements. Like there's so many reasons why once the data is here, that it doesn't just slide perfectly and aligns into your source of your billing system. Okay. And it relies on people in the middle at that point in time to manipulate data every month. And then the challenge with that is it lives in only a select few people's heads, and that frustrates that person. It frustrates the business as well. It's totally unscalable, and it's a risk that you want to try and mitigate where possible. The other is just timing. If you invoice on the 1st and your distributor invoices you on the 6th, what do you do with that information if you've already invoiced your customers, especially when it comes to either pro rates, or if their sync maybe doesn't feed directly into your system for certain charges that they do in arrears? It's like you're always left in this limbo, and there's a handful of decisions that you can make while understanding the pros and cons of those decisions, and then just get on with it. Okay. And then bundling, like I found bundling sort of 2017 was just, everyone was trying to do it. Oh, it'll be easier, like we'll package it all up. And for sure, I think for go-to-market teams, it probably was a little bit simpler. But then all of a sudden reality sets in, and actually this customer doesn't need this component of it. So what do? The systems aren't set up to manage when there's anything outside of just vanilla. And like if you're bundling things together and let's say it's a per user style of bundle, and there's 10 people because they've got 10 business premium, and let's say they absolutely have 10 people. But if they have any other services in there, it's highly unlikely that all of them will also equal that business premium count. So what do you do? What do you do in that situation? Like if one of those services actually says 12 and that's what you're getting billed for, you really want to account for that inside of your inside of your Autotask or ConnectWise, because that's the only way you're ever going to understand the true profitability. Which, if you go back to why you bought these systems in the first place, it was to answer that question. Okay, we find that there's a lot more companies unbundling today than driving towards bundling, because they've tried to solve it and sort of run into some serious friction. There is a way that we have now learned that can you can sort of have your cake and eat it, if you will. But the single most overarching rule, which you take away anything and whatever part of the journey you're on, and however complex it is for you now, it might not be it might have improved significantly, or it might be really hard. Whatever layer of the spectrum you're on, the overarching rule we live by is what you're getting billed for must go out the door in a profitable manner, or at least you understand it, but it has to go out the door. It has to be recharged. Okay. And interesting enough, over the years, this is the 5 areas that where you're going to misbill your clients. So this is literally the 5 and only 5 reasons that we can certainly think of. We're very open to changing our mind if there's some more. But unit counts are out. Like, that's what you're typically looking for on a monthly basis. Vendor says 10, PSA says 12. Okay, there's out by 2. Let's fix them. Another one is it's mapped to something that's expired or cancelled. So certainly with Autotask, there's no way that you can actually set a contract up to never expire, right? You can with ConnectWise, but in Autotask. So at some point, someone's going to have to eyeball that. Even if it's the 99 months in advance, at some point, it's like every single contract needs someone's finger on the pulse. Pricing has changed, right? This is a really big one. I've never seen unit price accuracy across the board at scale done well in these PSAs, and now I really understand why. That you might have like you may have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of line items that are feeding through your PSA every single month, and especially with the likes of NCE and discounts dropping off. But again, going back to why you initially picked up the systems of record that you're using, it was to understand customer profitability and what the ideal customer profile was. And the unit cost management and cost management from a third-party services perspective, the recurring services, is a really key ingredient in that. It's part of it. You need to get that accurate. And the last two, somewhat a little bit linked here, where you've got a vendor service and it's just not mapped to your PSA. If you're doing this as a manual exercise every month, so you take vendor reports and you line them up with either system and you go, cool, yeah, it's good. Like we would essentially bet money now that if you're doing it manually, for every 100 line items that you have in the vendor portal, 5 will not be getting billed at all. They won't exist inside of your billing system. And part of that is it just hasn't been switched off in the vendor portal. So if a customer calls in and says, hey, I don't need this thing anymore, admin team fixes that. That message doesn't, for some reason, get through to technical team who go and execute on actually switching something off. And all of those inaccuracies really do begin to add up, especially in a recurring subscription world, that the quicker you fix these things, the more money you get forever. So where do we start? Like whenever we bring on a new client, it's not so much as, oh, let's just connect things and automate, let's just rock and roll. Like we want to understand why or where there's complexity initially. And we spent years now building an onboarding process and we're still fine tuning. Even today, I added in a couple of new components to it, which I think just helps visualize the per vendor journey, like the status of where we're actually up to. But what we've learned is the foundation, the building blocks within the PSA need to be set up and just logical. When we're working through, we've always got the mindset, and you should think about this as well, is if you brought on a new staff member, would you need to sit with them? Likely yes, but how long would you need to sit with them to help them understand what it is that they're looking at? Because the yeah, the good litmus test is, could you just drop somebody in there and pick it up? And whenever we're bringing on new partners, we are the new eyes that just come in and look at their systems and all the rest of it. And like, we know very, very quickly if it's going to be a simple, smooth implementation before they've even told us. We're going to know. And a part of that is down to, like, it's actually going to be the next page into the naming conventions in particular. But in terms of housekeeping, as I said, most MSPs will set up these systems and then start getting data from these suppliers, and it's not aligned anymore from that point on. And it doesn't get easier at any point. It gets harder and harder and harder. And at some point it will break, and either you'll move to a new PSA thinking that's the answer, or you'll get in external help and try and re-engineer the whole thing. And I think just through today, I really hope we can impart just some very simple truths as to why it's probably complex, and give some sort of stepping stones that you can consider to go and try and just work through it on your own, because it's really not rocket science, and there's a formula to it. If you're small, medium, or large, if you've been with these systems for a really long time, not a long time, there's a formula that you can just sort of embed and gradually work towards. But I'm very much thinking with scale in mind. Simple to us means scale, and that's where you can drop somebody in to the team and they can largely pick up where you left off. But that's a really good spot for these big systems to be in. And as much as possible, the one-to-one rule. So this would somewhat go in, this would somewhat go in the opposite direction of those bundles, where you might have 6 different vendors lining up into one service in your system, okay, and the customer only sees one. There's actually ways that you can break things out in those bundles. Customer still sees one line item. PSA gets all the accurate unit counts per bundle. If that customer doesn't have that component to it, like, your PSA won't be reporting on it. Like, it's giving you exactly what you want and that control, and likewise makes it a lot easier to actually reconcile from vendor invoices and counts and all the rest of it. So let's get into some of the key naming conventions that we can consider. So the build a naming convention, it's a decision point at a couple of different levels. The contract level or agreement level in ConnectWise language. Okay. Having the company name as an example at the beginning, simple tip, but we'll go through this in a little bit more detail in a sec. The account and company name level, you really want to take a source of truth database, be that your ERP, accounting package, QuickBooks, Xero, Sage, whatever it is, it could be that. Or you say, no, Autotask is or ConnectWise is our complete source of truth. And then from there, use that naming convention and spend a project, but go through and actually marry up all the other systems, all the other vendors where applicable. Like, it's a utopian state to say that all 17 vendors are going to be all lined up perfectly with the same name all the time. It's not always reasonable, because even sometimes some vendors don't even give you the option to do so. But it's a mindset. If you can move towards that, it's better. And really importantly, at the service level, we'll go into, I think out of all of them, the service level is the most important, because that's the one that gets unwieldy, and that's the one that there's often the most amount of volume, especially if you've got a handful of people with admin access into these systems to actually make adjustments. So contract naming convention. So we see, like, when we look at these systems, we go, cool, this is going to be really straightforward. What they've typically got is something along the lines of if you've got one contract, and this is another decision that you'll have to make. Do you have one agreement contract, or do you have it broken? That's one extreme, where you've got it at the other end, where there's individual SKUs have their own convention or contract. And we've seen both work well, and we've seen both work not so well. Okay. And if you then break it down, I'll say the more common would be either by a business line or like a vendor line, either security, or you can see here we've got Sophos as our vendor. I'd say that that's probably the most common that we see. And but having one or the other or something on that spectrum doesn't mean you've set this up poorly. but being able to hand on heart say, yeah, everything we're getting billed for is accurately going out the door. That's more of the problem that we're trying to solve. So an example would be customer name, and the customer name will be used across a couple of these conventions. And the reason is that the inside all of these systems, just to be able to sort on columns and have them move around, and it'd be very easy to index what's going on. Like if every customer had security as their contract name, it just becomes marginally harder. You get a little bit less flexibility, and it's a very small change that you can ignore on invoices and all the rest of it if you don't want your customer to see it, because they don't see their name again. But what we've got here is customer name, vendor, or customer name, and then the business line. And then service naming convention. As I said, this to me is the most important to have a process around in your company. We firmly believe that if there's a unique service in your supplier, there should be a unique service inside of your PSA. Try not to have two going to one or one going to two, if possible. And again, utopian, but as a mindset, if even if you're buying Microsoft from multiple different distributors, they're two unique Exchange Online Plan 2s, as an example. So you may, in this instance, even have like our naming convention here is MSNCE, M for monthly frequency. That's what we're billing about. And then Exchange Online Plan 2. Like this is more of a shorthand. I just prefer that from a visual perspective. But if you wanted to have that really, really long, the whole wording or copy and paste directly out of it, cool, that's totally fine. And these are just some options. AV, like the business line here, quarterly service, Sophos. And then if the Sophos has multiple product lines, you can just tag them along the end. And the benefit behind this, and where we somewhat tripped over it, but had to find a solution, was a larger client of ours who was a combination of multiple MSPs who all bought and sold their own AV licenses. It came into one, they had an Autotask database. So it came in, they had 4 different vendors for antivirus, and they had one service inside their system for just called antivirus. So when it came time to decommission that service, it was impossible. When management wanted to run a report on which one they should decommission, completely blind, had no idea. So we took a few months, and this is a few years ago now. Now we've seen this just executed time and time and time again, where they can buy as many companies as they want and have as many AVs as they come in, and they've now got a process and a naming convention that they can use, which means they're never going to need to re-engineer, and they can decommission, they can report on whatever they want, they can decommission whatever they want. And it's just flipping out either Sophos into Barracuda or Trend or whatever. And if you don't want the vendor name to be shown to the client, that's reasonable. Like personally, I don't think it makes too much difference, but there's definitely a preference for a percentage that don't want that. So you just keep a list somewhere that you know that Sophos equals this, but you still want it unique. You still want to be able to, the team, for someone to drop in to pinpoint what on earth and where do we actually track this back to, because it's always going to inhibit scale if they're relying on 1 or 2 people that have this information. So to actually transition to this, okay, so very, very quickly, right? If you're running either Autotask or ConnectWise, they're the only 2 systems that this part of it would solve for, okay? There is something that's going to be for anyone with Microsoft, but if you were to, so what we're looking at here is something called the CRM Insights platform, okay? So we would strongly recommend, like, Google CloudOlive and freemium, and then just go through the steps, and you'll end up with this once you've connected up your system, okay? This is a pull on all your recurring billing items, okay? Looks like Excel. If you run ConnectWise, it's essentially the additions report that you can download. If you run Autotask, it's like a live report of some description that's with a few extra fields in there. But the cool thing about this is you can then use Excel-like filters and search for, if I want to look at CrowdStrike as my supplier that I want to look at, or the product or service name. And what it's going to give you is number of units, who's running them, who's making money, who's not making money, and an overarching view, whatever's then left inside of the left inside of the filters, it then actually gives you the how much you're selling it for and what you're actually making from it. Okay, so and you can keep layering in extra filters, and we've just got Excelsior here as an example, so much faster than actually accessing that information in either of those two systems. And why we built this a few years back, spend time just understanding what's going on in your business. Okay, and once we do that, then get in touch and we can do a quick session with you. Okay, and just answer any questions. But also during the onboarding process, we assist with a template to actually try and take naming conventions that you've got. And so I've actually written a blog which we can send this out to everyone afterwards. But when I touched on taking like building the PSA and then getting data, and it should really be in reverse. So here are all of the vendor services that you've got across the board. Put a little formula in and go unique, and then simply coming down and defining and deciding on your convention that you want to run with. Okay, that's really up to you. It's a blank canvas. If this is a problem, of course, this will set you up that you never need to ever re-engineer this in a material way in the future. And then once that's in place, then it's a good time to actually just go back one. Then it's a good time to consider some form of automation and work out where you maybe are underbilling or overbilling. And really looking at those 5 areas. Like if I was to come into, like, naturally, if there's 5 areas where you're going to miss bill, then within CloudOlive, which is what we've just come into now, this is the CloudOlive system, all our vendors that we bill on a monthly basis, where we're underbilling or overbilling, merge data from supplier, pulling from your PSA and going, all right, well, let's take a peek at CrowdStrike. Let's have a look at what's going on. Those 5 areas where there's billing risk, right, started with something that's coming from the vendor and not mapped back to your system. It's just this one here, unreconciled line. The remaining steps here mirror those 5 billing potential, like billing risk, as we really call it, live within the remaining steps. And as you work through them, they all get checked, crossed out. This thing will eventually disappear. And even better, if you just click on this toggle here, it actually leaves you with, these are the 4 lines you need to do stuff with. You've got 500, you got 100, you got 20, bang. This is where you've got some billing risk, simple as that. And last one, really around the NCE arrival, pricing, discounts dropping off and stuff. We saw some really diligent clients of ours struggle with, well, they just started selling things at a loss or not making money. And this is where we added in this column here, margin change from last month, the change in margin from last month, because we see month on month on month. So if this is ever red, it should be 0. Like 0 is nice and boring. You're making the same margin each month. If that's ever red, and then you can see here, actually, the unit costs don't marry up. You can quickly have a glance at, it was that blue web. So blue web there, last month vendor was $3. Now it's not $3. There's a problem. Do you accept it? Most of the time you'd actually go and have a conversation with the vendor the month that it happens, not 6 months later. Okay. But we will actually read there that you're making less margin than you were last month, and it's up to you what you want to do with that information. So if we can help elevate hard to find information amongst huge amount of data set, we just want to empower the team to be able to do that. The other one is with Microsoft NCE. You've now got a 7-day change window to certainly move license counts down, and managing unassigned licenses. And it's a tough, fragmented process as well. And as renewals can fall in different times, we've just built a way now, and it's actually in, I've got a handful of early users, beta users working with us now on it, but imagine a way that you can just automatically pull this data from Microsoft integrated, sort on cancellation allowed. It's coming up to my 7-day window. We've got 2 unassigned licenses. Here are the users. It's centralized, right? It's hopefully it's a very first step in this direction, which, like, we can see this expanding into any vendor, but the initial big problem we wanted to solve was with Microsoft. So quickly leave that up there because I know we're running out of time here, but we will send a follow-up with all this information. And in terms of next steps, right, we will send an email with the blogs that we've got. I'll also add in there, there was another blog that we did just around bundling. Because I know this is a big area, right? So we've just listed there's 5 levels of bundling, 1 being very easy and straightforward, and then 5 being the total end boss. So there, okay, so 1 being easy, 1-for-1 mapping, blah blah blah, right the way up to like you're doing this type of category, which is just inherently the most difficult, and it could just give you some options and just to see where you fit, okay, and just to know wherever you are, there's a solution to if there's a problem. If there is, if you're happy, then that's great. If you run Autotask or ConnectWise, do go through the CRM Insights, the free Insights tool, and link that up, have a play with it. And then I recommend just booking in a session with us, and we can go through findings from that tool and look at specifics that you may have in your business that you feel we may have some recommendations for. Or at least you can have someone just to work with you and go, yep, there's a problem. And I know that there's a handful of free tools going out there. We're in this for the really, really long haul, okay? We want to build something material that's going to be long-standing in this industry. We've just been in it for so long now that we want to build something that's just epic, okay? So if we can help now, there'll be a time in the future that no doubt it makes sense to work with each other in a commercial manner. But right now, that's not our immediate focus, okay? There's a couple of platforms we hope solves problems. And with that, we're getting to the very tail end. I'll actually, I'll probably look to wrap it up. But if there are any questions, pop it into the chat. And just want to say thank you. So there's actually, if you want any immediate questions or after this, Megan at CloudOlive.com. Megan's based in your time zone and will be the one liaising with you initially. And then I'll be working with you to do any form of implementation that we've got there. So I will, we'll leave it there. I want to thank everyone for your time, and we'll follow up with email and look forward to working with you when the time's right.